called synergist piperolene butoxide, PBO, long-lasting insecticides, nets, while the other one is pyrethroid, long-lasting insecticide nets. So this company had the sole distribution rights on this particular chemical called PBO, and in totality, from the investigation, we realized that the PS at that particular time did write to the CEO of KEMSA, instigating or rather compelling the CEO of KEMSA to change the specifications so that it can fit the chemical that was to be provided by Shobikaa Ltd, whose local agent was Crystal Kenya Limited. Basically, that was the starting point. The other problem was that there was, when the tender was to close on 23rd, the company, this is Shobikaa Ltd, at that particular time wanted to have a bid bond introduced into the documents, into the tender documents. Yet we all know that in procurement, the tender document, the bid bond is supposed to be part of the tender document. They're supposed to be delivered together. But in this circumstance, the bid bond was delivered by hand to the CEO's office on 23rd when the tender was supposed to close. So they had to find a way of extending the period of closure up to 10th of the next month of March, so that that particular bid bond, which had issues, can now be factored in, or rather regularized, and so that this company called Shobikaa could benefit out of that particular extension. Of course, there are many other issues. Like, we also realized that at the end of the when the tender was discontinued, for example, there is a company called Tianjin Yorkol International Trading Company that was among the bidders that initially bidded for this particular tender. They were disqualified on a fact that they were not authorized by a manufacturer. This company had provided sufficient evidence and proof that they're actually manufacturers. So a company that is a manufacturer was disqualified on the ground that they did not provide authorization from a manufacturer, yet they are actually manufacturers. So those are some of the challenges that the tender had. And
at the end of it all, what became of this tender?
At the end of what happened is, after the technical committee of the KEMSA did recommend Shobikaa to be awarded the tender, because this tender was actually was being financed by Global Fund. So the agreement was, after the tender evaluation committee's report is done, that report is to be handed over to Global Fund, the financiers. So when that report was surrendered or handed over to the Global Fund realized...
You said the evaluation committee of KEMSA
yes,
made a recommendation that Shobikaa be awarded.
That was the finding. That was the finding of KEMSA. That was the recommendation by the technical committee.
What happened next?
What happened is Global Fund decided to terminate the tender and asked an internal firm, or rather an internal organization called Wombo.org, which is the procuring arm of Global Fund, to do the procurement. And eventually, one of the companies that were actually disqualified because they were not authorized by a manufacturer ended up winning that tender, together with another firm called A to Z Textile Mills Limited. So those were the eventual winners, but that was after the termination of the recommendation by the technical committee of KEMSA.
So, just to clarify to the Senate, a company which had been disqualified by KEMSA ended up being the supplier.
That is correct.
Following the process which was undertaken by Global Bank.
That is correct.
Okay. What became of the bid bond?
Well, when we were investigating this, when the investigation was ongoing, we collected all the bid bonds of the firms that actually bidded, so that not only the bid bonds, but all the documents that related to the tender, so that we could evaluate and record statements. Now, the one that had issues was this one for Shobikaa. But when the tender was terminated, ordinarily, there would be no need to hold onto tenders or onto documents submitted by the tenderers, and they're usually returned. But for this particular one, because it was a questioned, document, the CEO of KEMSA wrote to the ESCC requesting for that document to be handed over. And eventually we did hand over the document to him after recommending disciplinary action against all the officers who were involved in the tendering process.